Illinois is more than Chicago. Beyond the skyline are towns where the roads narrow, the lights flicker, and questions go unasked. Some are fading. Some have already faded, everywhere except on a map. They're real places with zip codes and records to prove it. But after dark, they feel like something quiet has moved in. These are 10 towns, and the stories locals still whisper about them. Number 10. Cairo, Illinois. At the very tip of Illinois, where the Ohio River meets the Mississippi, sits Cairo, pronounced Cairo by those who still call it home. According to the 2020 U.S. Census, Cairo's population had fallen to just 1,769 people. That is down from nearly 15,000 at its peak in the early 20th century. In less than 100 years, the town lost more than 85% of itself. Median home prices in Cairo, per recent Redfin and Realtor.com listings, hover near $28,000. Entire Victorian mansions with original hardwood floors and wraparound porches listed for less than the cost of a used car in Chicago. FBI Crime Data Explorer records show Cairo's violent crime rate per capita ranks among the state's highest, a statistic that feels almost surreal when you stand on near-empty streets and hear nothing but the river. Cairo was a Civil War staging ground, a site of documented racial conflict across multiple decades, and a place whose wounds some locals suggest were never fully dressed. There are stories, told in careful tones, of figures seen moving through windows of buildings vacant for 30 years. Visitors report an unexplained unease on Magnolia Street, where a row of once grand homes stands in various states of collapse. It is not the silence that unsettles most people. It is the feeling, they say, that the silence is paying attention. Walking these streets at dusk, with Kentucky glowing faint on the far bank, it is hard not to feel that Cairo is still waiting for something. What that something is, no one has yet been willing to say out loud. Number 9. Centralia, Illinois. Centralia, in Marion County, carries a name that once meant something. A railroad crossroads, a modest industrial hub, a town of arrival. The 2020 census counted 12,644 residents, a number that has declined steadily for 3 decades. Median home prices sit around $75,000 per Zillow data, and unemployment in the surrounding region has tracked above state averages for years, according to Bureau of Labor Statistics reports. What Centralia is known for locally is the mine. The Centralia No. 5 mine disaster of 1947 killed 111 men in a single explosion, one of the deadliest coal mine accidents in American history. The disaster was preventable. Inspectors had warned of dangerous methane buildup. Workers had written letters. Nothing changed, until everything did. Locals still speak of cold spots near the old mine memorial, of an unease that settles over certain streets on the anniversary of the explosion. Whether that is history pressing down or something else, it is difficult to say. What is not difficult to say is that 111 families in this small town received the worst news of their lives on the same afternoon. And that kind of grief does not simply leave when the newspaper moves on. Number 8. Equality, Illinois. Gallatin County's town of Equality has a population of just 620 people per 2020 census data. Listings are sparse, turnover is rare, and public records suggest property values well below $50,000 for most residential properties. The local economy has contracted significantly over decades as salt production, once the county's backbone, collapsed entirely. Equality sits near the old Saline Creek Salt Works, one of Illinois' earliest industrial sites, where enslaved workers labored under brutal conditions in the early 1800s, despite Illinois' nominal status as a free state. Historians have documented the legal maneuvering that permitted this, a shadow economy built on suffering, quietly sanctioned by the same state that claimed to oppose it. Folklore in this corner of Gallatin County lingers on the creeks and timber hollows. Locals whisper about sounds near the old saline sites after dark, rhythmic and low, like something still working. Whether that is wind through old timber or the particular way guilt echoes through a landscape, the stories persist.
Number 7. Collinsville, Illinois. Collinsville, with a 2020 census population of 24,707, sits just east of St. Louis in Madison County. Median home prices register around $155,000 per Zillow, and on the surface, this is a functioning, unremarkable suburb of the Midwest. But just outside of town, rising from the Mississippi floodplain, stand the Cahokia Mounds, remnants of a pre-Columbian city that at its peak around 1100 AD may have housed more people than London. What happened to Cahokia remains one of North America's great unanswered questions. The city was abandoned by 1350 AD. No war, no flood, no plague has been definitively identified as the cause. A population estimated by archaeologists at up to 20,000 simply dispersed. A UNESCO World Heritage Site marks the spot now, and visitors are welcome during daylight hours. What visitors sometimes report is harder to categorize: disorientation near the larger mounds, a sense of being watched from terrain that is, by every measure, empty. Archaeologists note that Monk's Mound creates unusual acoustic effects due to its geometry. Whether acoustics explain everything reported here is a question the research has not yet closed.
Number 6. Eldorado, Illinois. Saline County's Eldorado, locally pronounced Eldorado with a stubbornness that feels almost defiant, registered 3,739 residents in the 2020 census. Median home values hover near $55,000 per Redfin. The town sits at the edge of the old southern Illinois coal belt, where mine closures across the 1980s and 1990s hollowed out the local economy in ways Bureau of Labor Statistics regional data still reflects today. Eldorado's lore centers on the rural roads south of town, near Galathea, where multiple unresolved incidents over the decades have prompted local discussion without resolution. Drivers report headlights appearing in rearview mirrors that do not correspond to any vehicle when they slow down. The accounts are consistent enough in detail to have circulated in regional newspapers without any credible explanation attached. Old mine shafts in this region can produce unusual pressure changes affecting air and light at ground level. Geologists have never specifically studied these roads for that effect. The stories, for now, remain what they are.
Number 5. Metropolis, Illinois. Where the state nearly dissolves into Kentucky, the 2020 census counted 5,909 residents. Median home prices register near $72,000 per Zillow, and downtown vacancies are visible to any visitor who spends more than an hour walking the blocks around the 15-foot Superman statue at the town square. The Superman branding is warm and earnest, but Metropolis has an older story beneath the cape. The town's location at the river's edge made it a nexus of river commerce, river crime,
and river disappearance throughout the 19th century. Regional archives document multiple individuals who arrived in Metropolis by steamboat and were never reliably recorded again. Locals whisper about a persistent eddy south of the boat launch, one that does not correspond to the visible geography of the bank. Fishermen who know the Ohio well have noted it for years. Hydrologists have a name for this phenomenon. The locals have a different name, and they use it more quietly. Number 4. Quincy, Illinois. Quincy, in Adams County, is a city of 40,633 for the 2020 census, one of the larger entries on this list, and one that wears its age in its architecture. Hundreds of 19th century mansions line the bluff above the Mississippi, many in states of partial restoration, partial decay, or quiet abandonment. Median home prices run around $110,000 per Zillow, a figure that reflects both the grandeur of available inventory and the slow erosion of the buyer pool. Quincy earned a grim footnote during the 2019 Legionnaire's disease outbreak at the Illinois Veterans Home, one of the deadliest such outbreaks in recent state history. State public health records document its toll on a community already navigating economic decline. But the story locals tell with the most visible discomfort is older. The Villa Catherine, a Moorish-style castle built on the bluff in 1900, has generated a consistent stream of unexplained visitor accounts since it opened to the public. Cold air in sealed rooms, footsteps in unoccupied upper floors, the figure of a man in period clothing seen briefly in upper windows before docents can confirm anyone was present. The city has documented none of this officially. The guest book entries, however, are another matter. Number 3. Alton, Illinois. Alton has been called by more than one paranormal tourism guide one of the most haunted cities in America. We will not repeat that framing here. What we will say is this: Alton, with 26,217 residents per the 2020 census and a median home price near $130,000 per Redfin, is a city whose history has been violent, layered, and largely unresolved. It was home to a Confederate prison during the Civil War, a converted penitentiary where smallpox spread through the prisoner population with catastrophic speed. The dead were buried in a mass grave near the river. The site is marked. The ground, locals will quietly note, has never quite settled the way ground usually does. Alton's violent crime rate, per FBI Crime Data Explorer data, runs notably above state averages. Foreclosure rates in certain zip codes have been tracked by the Illinois Housing Development Authority as a point of ongoing concern. The vacancy rate on certain downtown blocks is visible and persistent. Visitors report anomalous experiences near the McPike Mansion, near the old prison site, and near a stretch of river where Native American burial grounds are documented to have existed before the city's construction. The experiences are varied. The consistency across unrelated visitors who had no contact with one another before reporting is what gives the researchers pause. Number 2. Odin, Illinois. Odin, in Marion County, is the kind of town that does not announce itself. The 2020 census recorded 962 residents. Median home values sit near $45,000 per public listing data. The main street has more vacant storefronts than open ones, and the grain elevator at the edge of town is the tallest structure for miles in any direction. What makes Odin notable is not one dramatic event, but an accumulation of smaller strangeness that locals describe with a weariness suggesting long familiarity. A stretch of rural road east of town, along what older maps mark as a Civil War skirmish site, has produced a decades-long series of consistent reports, lights moving at ground level without a visible source, a sound described as low singing in no identifiable language, and, documented in the local paper in the 1980s, the case of a farmhand who left his property to investigate a light in the field and was found the next morning, miles away, with no recollection of the intervening hours. The farmhand was interviewed. He was not considered unreliable. He has since declined all further questions on the subject, which, in its own way, is the most unsettling detail of all.
Number 1 on this list is a town called Thebes, Alexander County. 2020 census population, 392 people. It sits on a limestone bluff above the Mississippi River, nearly 500 miles south of Chicago. Median home prices are, by current listing data, nearly impossible to calculate. Properties rarely list, rarely sell, and when they do, the figures suggest a market that has largely ceased to function in any conventional sense. Thebes has a courthouse. Built in 1848, it is one of the oldest courthouses in Illinois. It is also the courthouse where Dred Scott, the enslaved man whose Supreme Court case would accelerate the nation toward civil war, was held briefly in the basement on his journey north. The room is still there. The building is still standing, listed on the National Register of Historic Places. In the most literal sense, this is the place where one of American history's gravest legal decisions has a physical address. Thebes also sits directly on one of the Mississippi River's most unpredictable channels. Flooding has been a recurring documented threat, per Army Corps of Engineers reports, across multiple decades. Parts of the town's original footprint no longer exist above the waterline in wet years. The river, it sometimes seems, is slowly reclaiming what was built along its edge. What locals report here is not dramatic, it is quiet. A pressure in the air near the courthouse basement steps that does not correspond to temperature or weather. A sensation near the river's edge at dusk that more than one visitor has described, independently and without prompting, as grief. Not fear, not unease. Grief. The way a place can hold an emotion long after the people who felt it are gone. Thebes does not promote itself as a destination. There is no gift shop, no walking tour brochure. There are 392 people living quiet lives in one of the most overlooked corners of a state that has largely forgotten this place exists. But history has a weight. In places that hold as much of it as Thebes, the courthouse basement, the river below, the limestone bluff that has watched 2 centuries of American consequence move past, do not simply store that weight, they carry it. You feel it when you arrive, and if you are paying attention, you feel it long after you have driven back to wherever you came from.